Welcome to the deep dive. Today, things are really escalating in the Middle East. We're looking closely at the conflict between Israel and Iran.
That's right. And specifically, the growing possibility, or at least speculation, about direct U.S. involvement.
It feels like the tone has just shifted dramatically. Suddenly there's talk of major military movements, very high stakes.
It's incredibly tense, happening in a region already deep in conflict. We're drawing heavily on BBC reporting here, which gives a pretty detailed view of what's happening.
And that's our goal in this deep dive, to cut through some of that uncertainty for you. We want to synthesize the key details from the reports.
Give you a clearer understanding of, say, the U.S. position, what Israel is aiming for strategically, what life is like for people on the ground in Iran right now.
And the reactions from around the world, too. We'll try to help you grasp the core issues without getting bogged down. So let's jump in.
Okay, so to really get a handle on things, we probably need to start with President Trump's recent statements. They've been very, very direct.
Very direct is putting it mildly, calling for Iran's unconditional surrender.
Exactly. And then there were those social media posts where he called Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, an easy target. Pretty provocative stuff.
But then, almost in the same breath, there was a kind of walk back, wasn't there? Or at least a qualification.
Yeah, he added that the U.S. was not going to kill him, at least not yet. Or another version was not for now.
Which just adds to the confusion, or maybe the calculated ambiguity, keeps everyone guessing.
It certainly does. It feels like a deliberate strategy, maybe. Keep your adversaries off balance. He's also talked about patience wearing thin.
Right, he mentioned frustration over missiles hitting civilians or U.S. soldiers.
And that phrase, patience wearing thin, well, it signals a potential shift, doesn't it? Maybe a lower threshold for a more aggressive response.
How does that square with his whole America First message, though? Avoiding foreign wars was a big campaign promise. And some Republicans in Congress are pushing that line, too.
It's a definite tension there. You have this core conviction, he states very clearly. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. He believes they're very close now.
That's non-negotiable for him.
Seems like it. But then you have the deal-maker persona. Remember that 60-day deadline for talks he set?
Which came and went.
Right. And sources suggest he felt Iran was just stringing him along. So now perhaps he believes that a credible threat of military action actually strengthens his negotiating position, makes him look tougher.
So is this mostly posturing to force Iran's hand, or is there a real plan for U.S. action already in motion?
That's the million-dollar question. The BBC sources say that's known only to Mr. Trump and his closest advisors. The uncertainty itself is, well, it's a factor.
Okay, so beyond the words, what are we seeing in terms of actual military preparations? Any concrete signs?
Yes, and this is quite significant. Sources describe highly unusual movements, specifically at least 30 U.S. KC-135 tanker aircraft.
Those are the planes used for refueling fighters and bombers mid-air, right?
Exactly. They were moved from U.S. bases to Europe over just 3 days. And there's visual confirmation, too, pictures of tankers flying with fighter jet escorts.
What do the military analysts make of that?
Well, one expert quoted by the BBC suggested it points towards contingency plans to support intensive combat operations in the Middle East. It's not just routine shuffling. It suggests readiness for something bigger.
So the U.S. position is still officially that Iran shouldn't get a nuclear weapon, and ideally, they give it up peacefully. And they have assets there to, quote, defend.
That's the official line. Meanwhile, Israel has its own clear objectives. They launched what they called a preemptive offensive about 5 days before these reports.
Targeting what specifically?
A whole range of sites. Nuclear facilities, Isfahan, Natanz, Iraq, but also oil depots, gas refineries, air defense systems, military bases, and missile launch sites across Iran. A broad campaign.
And there's one target Israel seems particularly focused on where they apparently need U.S. help.
That's the Fordo uranium enrichment site. It's built deep underground, heavily fortified, a major concern for Israel for a long time.
And they want the U.S. involved because?
Because Israel apparently doesn't have the specific weapon needed to guarantee its destruction. They want American B-2 stealth bombers to hit it.
Using what kind of bomb?
What's known as the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP. It's a huge bunker buster bomb designed precisely for targets like Fordo. And the thinking is, only the U.S. has this capability readily available.
And Israel's national security chief even said the war won't finish until Fordo is hit. That's quite a statement.
It shows how central that target is to their strategy. On a related note, the Israeli military says they're seeing Iran's missile barrages getting smaller.
Which they interpret as.
Proof that their tactic of hitting Iran's missile launchers is actually working, reducing Iran's capacity to strike back.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Amidst all this high-level strategy and military movement, what's the impact on ordinary Iranians? What are the sources saying about life on the ground?
Yeah. It sounds incredibly difficult. There are reports of millions fleeing Tehran, the capital, roads just absolutely choked with traffic.
Like a bank holiday, but obviously under very different frightening circumstances.
Yes, exactly. Described as a desperate goodbye. There are these really human stories coming out, too. Addicts fleeing a rehab center that got damaged in attacks.
Wow.
And another story of a resident who, says he hates the Islamic Republic but is staying put in Tehran, trying to maintain some routine, find open cafes, just connect with people. His feeling was sort of, we have no one but each other now.
That really brings home the human cost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Beyond the politics.
Absolutely. And for those who stay, daily life is tough. Reports of damaged water systems in parts of Tehran, ATMs running out of cash, basic services disrupted.
How is Iranian state media portraying all this?
They're framing it as Iran fighting the enemy on its own soil. They claim Israel has infiltrated the country at all levels, blaming them for things like car bombs and saying they've found enemy drone factories.
And inevitably, civilians are caught in the middle.
Tragically, yes. Civilians are paying the price. The reports mention the Red Crescent searching for survivors in rubble, people losing their lives, nurses, skaters, artists mentioned specifically, residential buildings being hit.
Has Israel addressed the issue of civilian casualties?
Their UN ambassador made a statement saying they will do everything we can to minimize civilian casualties, but it's a war, and affirming they will continue to target the military sites. It's the grim reality of conflict.
So, looking at the bigger picture, is the goal here regime change in Iran or something else?
That's actually quite ambiguous. The sources note that few officials in Washington or Tel Aviv are openly talking about what happens if the regime collapses.
Interesting. So what's the interpretation then?
One interpretation floating around is that the goal might not be regime change in the sense of installing a new government, but rather achieving total capitulation, total surrender, total humiliation of the current Islamic regime.
So leaving the regime in place, but severely weakened and without its nuclear program.
Potentially. That seems to be one reading. A weakened state, stripped of its most dangerous capability.
But what if the leadership doesn't capitulate?
Well, the analysis suggests that only if the supreme leader refuses to surrender, that's when the U.S. may choose to strike the supreme leader and eliminate him.
And that would likely lead to regime collapse.
That's presented as the almost inevitable consequence of eliminating Khamenei. So his removal isn't the primary goal, perhaps, but a potential trigger if surrender isn't forthcoming.
And how is the rest of the world reacting to all this? It must be causing huge concern.
Absolutely. You see different responses. President Macron of France proposed a ceasefire, but President Trump reportedly rejected it, saying the U.S. is looking for better.
Looking for better than a ceasefire. Okay.
Yeah.
What about other allies, like the UK?
The UK confirmed it's sending more military jets to its base in Cyprus, explicitly to bolster UK interests in the region, a sign of readiness or concern.
And the G7 leaders, the big economic powers.
They met recently, and reports say they were essentially left guessing what President Trump may do next. There's a lot of uncertainty, even among allies.
And the economic fallout is a worry too, right? UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer raised that.
He did. He specifically voiced concerns about the potential impact back home on people's bills, drawing that direct line, like how the Ukraine conflict hit energy prices and the cost of living.
So his focus is on de-escalation.
Yes, while also acknowledging Israel's right to self-defense and echoing that G7 consensus, the deep concern about Iran's nuclear program. It's a balancing act for many leaders.
So to kind of wrap things up, we're seeing this intense mix of military posturing, maybe preparations, alongside complex diplomatic signals, and all of it having a devastating human impact already.
It's incredibly volatile, a lot of moving parts, high stakes, and the potential for miscalculation feels very real right now.
Definitely. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? With all these different players, the U.S., Israel, Iran, the international community, and their stated goals, from preventing a nuclear Iran to achieving unconditional surrender, or just people trying to survive day to day, what does victory even look like here? For anyone involved, it's hard to see a clear path where everyone gets what they want. Something to think about as this continues to unfold.